Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Hulu review, and today I'm going to be talking about Not Okay. Not Okay is an American satirical comedy drama that tells the story of Danny Sanders, a photo editor for a magazine who struggles with making friends and staying on top of the duties of her job. In an attempt to pursue fame and recognition as a writer, she decides to fake a trip to a writer's retreat in Paris. Things take a turn when a terrorist attack is committed in Paris around the same time as her supposed trip. Danny is then forced to double down on her lies and ends up finding fame as a survivor of the attack. But as she rises through the ranks of stardom, she has to pay the price of dealing with her guilt and continued loneliness. Contrary to what this movie's title might suggest, it ended up being an okay movie to watch. It has a bit of an identity crisis as far as what it's trying to say, and isn't as funny as I thought it would be, but the portrayal of the characters and some of its themes were enough to keep me somewhat interested. Zoe Deutsch plays the lead role of Danny, and does a good job insofar as the performance is concerned. She balances being a socialite and a loner quite well, as the audience gets to see all the little things that affect her in both areas. I like the way her character is introduced. The movie starts with the ending, showing the consequences of her actions before rewinding 2 months in time to show where it all began. This kept me intrigued to see how she would end up where she'd go, as well as reinforcing the fact that her character is not meant to be likable, at least at first. Now, while I do prefer a protagonist that's easy to root for, it is possible to make an unsympathetic protagonist, provided that they're made that way from the beginning and that they're still interesting to watch, and Danny sort of fulfills these requirements. The lengths that she goes to cover her tracks and build up her image as the survivor of a deadly attack are pretty amusing to see play out. She goes from doing something as simple as making a fake website to writing a mainstream article to attending massive rallies. It was funny to see Danny try to deal with it all as everything gradually snowballs out of control. There's an emotional side to her character as well, where she's depressed, wants to be noticed by others, and tries to make friends to avoid being lonely. This is understandable to an extent, but for me it kind of fell flat, largely due to the fact that everything that happens to Danny is her fault. She's made out to be a good person who made a bad mistake and is caught in a bind, but to me she never really came across as a good person, as there's always an ulterior motive to everything she does. There were times even at the beginning before all the chaos occurred where she rubbed me the wrong way. An example of this is when she tries to make friends with a couple of queer employees at her workplace. While her attempts at socializing with them are honest, the way she presents herself is annoying at best and ignorant at worst, so it was easy to see why she was disliked so much. It feels like the movie can't decide between wanting her to be likable and unlikable, so it tries to strike a middle ground that feels weird in its approach. This leads me to talk about the themes that are attached to the movie regarding obsession with fame and the dangers that come with it. I felt this was the strongest part about the movie, as we get to see Danny affected by both the highs and lows of her newfound fame in negative ways, and how she reflects on being okay with not being okay. Guilt follows Danny wherever she goes, instead of the trauma one would normally expect from the survivor of a deadly attack. When she's invited to private parties or receives some sort of benefit, she's always haunted by her actions, and because she doesn't actually have any trauma, it's impossible for her to relate to others who do. This is where the character Rowan comes into play. She was a fantastic character to go along with Danny, as she forces her to be more introspective about her actions on occasion, which feels more natural compared to other moments when Danny thinks by herself while still chasing clout. Rowan, being a school shooting survivor, acts as an agent for change and social reform, which Danny takes advantage of for her own benefit. The relationship between these two kept me in suspense to see what would happen when things inevitably blew up, and contributed to the ongoing critique of celebrity culture and how social media is often misused. This being said, I couldn't help but feel like there was a clash of sorts in this regard. As enjoyable as Rowan was, the movie goes back and forth so much between her and Danny's stories that it's sometimes hard to keep track of everything going on. Again, the movie has a hard time deciding on things, this case being if it wants to focus on the trauma of survivors and how they can cope with said trauma, or on the pressures of fame and the consequences of pursuing it. It almost feels like there's two movies going on at the same time, which leaves the plot feeling unfocused. Most of the satire that's present in this movie was a mixed bag for me. Much of it consists of awkward situations where Danny tries to fit in somewhere she doesn't belong, and her clumsily trying to maintain her image, which people have no trouble believing in anyway. Whether dealing with a flirty coworker, overbearing parents, or random people in support groups, Danny interacts with many people who help add to her narrative while also being varied in the reactions. It really goes to show how easily manipulated people can be just by looking at and approaching things at face value. The comedy behind these situations doesn't always work though. Most of them felt too awkward in their execution, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, as that is kind of the point, but because Danny is so awkward and fake as a character, I ended up groaning at a lot of her scenes instead of laughing at them, so the humor behind them doesn't land quite as well as it should. I will say, however, that there was one character I found hilarious, in the form of the influencer Colin, who's played by Dylan O'Brien. Every one of his lines is pure gold, especially once his real-life persona is revealed. It's such a shame that he's so underused in this movie. And for all the faults that the story has, the movie as a whole is structured quite well. The entire movie is sectioned into parts that clearly define what to expect going forward, which makes it easier to focus on the bigger picture behind these parts. All things considered, it's a fairly basic rise and fall from grace scenario, promoting values of community and friendship over popularity and self-image. The finale at the end of the movie is surprisingly moving and is great in how it flips the script, but its impact is reduced by its ongoing identity issues. Overall, Not Okay is a movie that is in fact okay, but could have been a lot better than it ended up being. If you like black comedies that satirize society, especially ones that center around social media, and you don't mind an unsympathetic protagonist, you might enjoy this movie. I really wanted to like this movie a lot more than I did, and there were parts about it that I enjoyed, especially with Zoe Deutsch's performance, but its presentation is messy and needs more fine-tuning to make it stand out more. What did you think about this movie? Do you think it nailed its themes regarding obsession with fame and social media, or do you think it fell short with them? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's gonna wrap up my review of Not Okay. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Mexican romantic comedy Don't Blame Karma. Bye bye!